Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the second part of the Crazy Name episode with Paul. But before we jump in, if you want a plush, listen to that little video. Aren't these cute? Do you also want to get a chance to get one of those giveaways, one of those plush ninja cats? Please check out this URL, and I wish all of you good luck. Okay, now that you know how to get one of those plush ninja cats, let's deep dive into our episode. Again, I have Paul with me. Paul, welcome.
Thank you for having me back.
So last time we actually looked at authentication protocols and how they can be used to reduce false positives. And then we had a brief introduction, I think, into false negatives, false negatives. And that's where we want to connect today the dots, right?
Yes, so last time we spoke about the different email authentication standards. We talked about how they work on their own and that they are effectively not so great on their own. They have limitations, they have caveats. When you use them together, it does help prevent some of the false positives because we're taking the guesswork out about whether the sending party is indeed legit or not. But that's not the whole story here. Just because we can authenticate that the message came from somewhere it's claiming to be associated with doesn't mean that the message isn't spam or malicious. So any email security service is going to go ahead and check that message for malicious content, for spam, make sure it's not a phishing threat. And that includes Exchange Online Protection. We will do all of those things. And if you are a Defender for Office 365 subscriber, we will also put in the additional protections with safe links, safe attachments, and our enhanced anti-phish policies. Now, this leads us up to when maybe you're working with a business partner, and they'll go ahead and they'll say something like, oh, now that we're working together, you need to put our email addresses in your allow list, or put our domain in your allow list, put our IP address in our allow list.
So they want to do this or let the company do this so that all of their emails are just coming through? So
correct. They say, hey, yeah, they say, you know what? We don't want our emails being caught as spam for you. But adding their information, adding their sending infrastructure, their domains, what have you, to an allow list, that's not a good thing. That might have worked way back when, after we squashed the Y2K bug and we were all eagerly awaiting sequels for the Matrix. But nowadays, there's better ways to do that. When you add an email address, or an email domain, or an IP address to any of the allow list sections within our protection stack within EOP, you are going to bypass not only spam, which is their intent, but you're also going to override some of our anti-phishing protections as well, which is why we say override. These are overrides. You are overriding parts of the email protection stack when you say, yes, I inherently trust this sender. Yes, I inherently trust this IP address. Heike, do you remember last time when we were looking at SPF and we saw that there was the P1 and the P2, and that the P2 doesn't necessarily need to match the P1, and how easy it is for me to just spoof that P2 address?
Yes, but we had other protocols that help with that.
We do. But when you add an email address to one of those allowed lists, we are looking at any message that would come through with that P2 address or domain, and that's what's going to bypass. So if I'm easily able to spoof a P2 sending address, if I'm able to spoof that address, and that address is in one of your allowed lists, I'm getting through, not only having my, not only being permitted to override spam, but to potentially override phish in a lot of scenarios. Now,
you're freaking me out, Paul. So, okay, this is all scary and bad, and people can tamper with stuff. So help me understand.
Well, there is a little more to it. It's not all gloom and doom. Okay,
Oh,
so even if you have any of these senders in an allow list, um, or an exchange transport rule, which is set to bypass spam filtering, we are going to check those messages for malware, and we're going to prevent malware from being delivered. We're
okay.
also going to check, and we're going to prevent any messages that are seen as high confidence phish. We're going to prevent delivery of those as well. There is a small caveat with that high confidence phish, though, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Um, but going back to the scenario where someone asks you to add their domain to your allowed list, this is something that happens, and this is something that happens quite regularly in the real world. Is some department, HR, accounting, whatever, somebody other than IT, they're going to go out and they're going to purchase some sort of service, um, be it a tech service, be it a what have you, that is going to utilize email. And part of the setup with that is going to be the vendor saying, "Hey, add our addresses to your allow list." And as we now know, that's not a good thing to do.
So,
Um,
but like, if you add it,
mhm.
does it mean everything from that address comes through without being checked at all? Or is there like a different value that you can set and say, okay, I add this address to my allow list, but with the option foo, which means, yes, still scan it or
So
something?
we will still check for malware, and we will still check for high confidence phish. Something that we are very confident that it is a phishing message. We will still check for those, and we'll still block those. But spam, we're going to allow that through. Technologies within our anti-phishing protection, such as checking for spoof, checking for impersonation attempts, things that aren't, high confidence phish, but that we might think are phishing, that we think are suspicious. We're going to say, all right, well, you know what? You said to allow them through, so we're going to allow them through. So don't do that. Uh, and the thing about it is, provided that vendor has sender authenticate their email authentication stuff set up, that we can ensure that they are sending legitimately, um, and provided they're not sending spam or phish, the message shouldn't be caught as spam or phish in the first place. So when they're asking you to add that entry to the allow list, no, no, don't do that. And if the person from that other department comes back and says, well, they're a trusted partner. We trust them. We want them to not have a problem. Okay, cool. I'm glad you trust them. But do you trust everybody on the internet? Do you trust that this partner of yours won't be compromised and potentially be used to send out blankets of phishing messages that you're allowing through unencumbered? No, no,
So what do
that's
we
not a
do?
good thing.
What's the alternative?
Well, the alternative is to ensure that that vendor has their email authentication configuration set up properly.
Okay.
If it's something that they can't do and people are pushing back, you got to get someone higher up in the pecking order to approve that risk. Your CISO, your CIO, your CEO, whoever it is. Uh, don't blanketly allow things because that can cause problems. Which brings me to managing false negatives. Many of the false negative tickets that are handled by support are due to overrides. I've seen many security related severity A incidents where it was tied back to a phishing email that was allowed through based on an exchange transport rule override. So, are you seeing how these are fitting together now, Heike?
Yes, yes. So slowly I'm getting it.
Very good, very good.
Thank you.
Uh, I will say that not all overrides are created equal. The ETR, the Exchange Transport Rule, does give you a little more flexibility and granularity in that not only can you specify maybe a sender, and it can be either the P1 or the P2, depending on your requirements, you can add additional criteria, sending IP address, header value, content of the message, specific verbiage, and then you can set an SCL or a spam confidence level. You can set it to a low level. You can set it to a high level to have the message not be delivered, or you can set it to SCL -1. SCL -1 is that bypass. The verbiage says bypass spam filtering, but that is the override. That's where we're going to go ahead and override the spam checking and many of those anti-fish policy checks.
Why would someone set it that way?
That's a great question. Uh, Sometimes they're instructed to do so by a partner, much like the scenario I just threw out at
The
you.
don't trust me, don't trust anyone.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
You know it. Uh, the other is a scenario where someone has a third-party mail security service in front of us. And then that third-party mail security service says, no, you're already protected. We protect you. Put in the SCL -1 so that you don't have problems with messages being caught accidentally. And, you know, okay, I get that. But that kind of, as you can see here, that still causes problems. Some of those fish messages. Well, how did this fish message get through? Well, it got through at the first level. We saw it, but you allowed it through. And that leads me to say, hey, nothing's perfect. I'd like to say that we catch everything 100% of the time. Uh, we don't. Some things pop through accidentally. Some things are caught accidentally, as it is with everybody else. And if anybody tells you that they catch 100% of the threats, 100% of the time, and you're never going to have a false positive, get that down in writing and find out what happens when they can't deliver on that promise.
So you were saying, Paul, sometimes, I mean, even if there is SCL set to -1, we saw it, but of course it's an override, so we let it through. Is there like a reporting for people so they can still see what kind of was detected and would have been filtered out?
Sure, sure. You can see that information inside of the Threat Explorer or
Okay.
real-time detections. If you are a defender for Office 365 P2 or E5 user for the Threat Explorer, if you are P1, you get the real-time detections.
Mhm.
Also, for the P2 users, there is advanced hunting, and these are all things that you can dig into.
Okay.
Um, I will say though that the good news is a lot of customers are coming around to the idea that that SCL -1 may not be great. Maybe adding these senders to an allow list, a blanket allow list, maybe that's not such a good idea. And they are taking a defense in depth approach. And with that defense in depth approach, instead of utilizing that SCL -1, you can utilize what's called enhanced filtering for connectors, which we touched on a little bit last time. Um, where we're going to skip over any IP addresses that you trust so that we don't look at those and assume that those IP addresses are associated with that sending domain, much like our SPF checks. And in addition to that, we also have ARC. Remember, we talked about ARC last time, where we can take the previously consumed validation of the email authentication pieces, and we can act on that instead of rechecking everything.
Mhm.
So that will help prevent any false positives that might be seen as um, spam or phishing due to somebody else being in front of us.
Okay. So do we have recommendations for customers to find how their overrides are being used?
Yes, we do actually. Um, Ben Harris, friend of the show, was on previously. He
Yes.
wrote up a Learn document as part of the Defender for Office 365 step-by-step series. I created a short link for it yesterday, aka.ms/review overrides, and I can hop into the portal real quick to take a look-see.
That would be awesome.
Here is the learn.microsoft.com article that I noted, and you'll see here that there are a number of KQL queries that Ben had written. And what I'm going to do now is I am going to run a couple of them just to show you what they look like. So the first one here is top override source. And if I run that, we're loading our results here. I'll scroll this up a little bit, and we'll see that many of them are related to sender allow block list. These are messages that were caught due to the sender block list. These ones right here are messages that were recognized as spam due to the sender allow block list. And if I run this next one, we're going to look at top threats overridden. If I scroll down here, we'll see that the largest number of them here were indeed just spam, and they were found by the advanced filter. Next up were URL detonation, along with a spam verdict. And we do have a few others, but this one I found to be the most helpful. I did toss this together here pretty quickly. We're going to go ahead and look at any items that were allowed that were not an empty threat type, and that the org policy level was exchange transport rule. Run that. And here we can see a whole list of messages that were allowed through, along with the threat type and the org level action. So we allowed all these messages along with the transport rule that was in use. So if I look at this one, we see that this message actually had two transport rules associated with it. First contact, safety tip, and cat1. Knowing these two, I believe that this one was allowed through because of this transport rule right here.
So is cat one, is that a cat or is that something specific?
I think it's something different, but for the sake of today, we'll say it's cat, so it's a ninja cat.
Okay.
So there are occasions where we can still get things wrong. Again, we're not foolproof. Nobody's foolproof, right?
Yeah.
And this is where submissions and the tenant allow block list will come into play. We also call that tabl. An administrator can log into the Defender portal, and they can report messages to us as either being false negatives, they're phish or they're spam or malware, or they're false positives, and they should have been allowed through. This will help the Defender for Office 365 machine learning models learn better from us. So if we got it wrong, help teach us, help us
Mm-hmm.
learn about it. And the way that will work is when you go in and you submit that message to us, you also have the option to add an item to the tenant allow block list. You can add that item to tabl. You can allow the sender for up to 30 days. You can allow a URL if we find that the URL was bad. You can allow these senders or these items in a temporary fashion while the system learns. The entries can also be automatically expanded another 60 days for a total of 90 days, and that would occur in a scenario where maybe we haven't learned enough about this message or this pattern yet. So we're waiting for more samples to come through so we can better learn about it. The opposite applies as well. You can also utilize submission to share a message with us that was bad that we didn't catch, and you can block that sender, that URL, what have you. You can block, the blocks can be done on a temporary basis, or you can have the blocks put in permanently if you so
Mm-hmm.
desire. And when it comes to false positives, if you are an E5 subscriber or a Defender for Office 365 P2 subscriber, you can also utilize Advanced Hunting or Threat Explorer to review the indicators of compromise on the message to see why we got it wrong. If you're a Defender for Office 365 P1 customer, you can utilize the real-time detections tool to look that information up as well. And regardless of your license level, you can always review the message headers in the message header analyzer, which you can reach at aka.ms/MHA. And you can compare the values to what we have published in the anti-spam message headers article, which you can reach at aka.ms/anti-spam headers, all one word. And with that, I figure I can hop into the portal and demonstrate the admin submission process along with tabl. And to kick off this process, I'm going to start by looking in Threat Explorer. And I've already started looking for some messages here. There's one message in particular that I was playing with previously, this check this out message. And I found this previous URL that was being used to host some malicious content, and I sent it to myself for testing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this message's network message ID, and I'm going to go over to the submissions section of the portal.
How would someone mark beers tomorrow night as something bad?
Uh,
Just kidding.
that's all good. And I'm going to submit a new message for analysis to Microsoft. I'm going to say email. I'm going to drop the network message ID in, and it's going to give me an option to select a recipient. So I will select myself because I was the only recipient on this message. We're going to say whether it should not have been blocked or whether it should have been blocked. And in this case, yeah, it should have been blocked. And I will say that it was containing malware. And do I want to block this person? Yeah, I do. I'm going to go ahead and block the sender. And I'm going to say, we're going to never expire that because they've proven that they cannot be trusted. So I'm going to go ahead and hit submit. And my item has been submitted. Now that I've submitted that, the entry will be added to the tenant allow block list. It may take a little while, but here is my tenant allow block list. And as you can see, we already have a number of entries in here, a number of allowed and a number of blocked senders. So this is where you would manage those. If you need to add any blocks, you can come in here and add the senders or domains to be blocked. And then we also have additional sections here for spoofed senders, URLs, and files. The spoofed senders is nice in the event that you need to allow someone in who is working with your company, if they are a vendor, a trusted vendor, and perhaps they're working through getting their email authentication stuff sorted out. You can add them in here temporarily to help them still get their messages through while they're working through that. Heike, that's all I have for you for today. If you have any further questions or concerns or run into a head-scratching challenge, visit us at the Microsoft Tech Community.
Thank you. I think that's a good point, actually. Thank you again, Paul, for being my expert on this part 1 and part 2. Thank you. I learned so much. I hope as well that people that watch the show learn a lot too. And I hope that they get rid of some of those false positives and false negatives by configuring things the proper way and being a little bit more cautious when it comes to, adding things to lists where they shouldn't be on it.
Absolutely.
Again, Paul,
Slash out those overrides. Master
yes.
email off.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for watching. And again, make sure you get into winning a plush ninja cat. And I hope I see you again on the next episode on the Virtual Ninja Show. Bye bye.